So what we will have now is a recording of Dr. Vandana Shiva, who is our next plenary speaker. She's the leader of the International Forum on Globalization and the founder of Navdanya.
Greetings from India for all of you who have gathered at the Global Health Day of the University of California, and to center justice in the health system. I have learned and evolved both through my studies in quantum theory as well as my lifetime of experience that sustainability, justice, and health are deeply interconnected because we are deeply interconnected. We are part of the earth, an amazing 400 or 500 years denialism that we are part of the earth. I have called this denial, this separation, ecological apartheid. The word apartheid was created by the Boers, the Afrikaans, when they took over South Africa, and then after grabbing the land, after taking all the resources, the gold, the vegetables, the fruits, they then decided that the way to rule those whose land they had grabbed was through apartheid, separation, separateness. And this has many meanings in it. One is, of course, separating those who are connected. After all, the original people of South Africa were the blacks. But their land was anyway the connection, even of the colonizers, even today. But separation going hand in hand with the sense and illusion of superiority. That not only are we separate from you, not only are we different from you, but we are superior to you. And this ecological apartheid applies to nature, the illusion that humans are superior to other species. We call it anthropocentrism. But humans are separate from nature. Even the Oxford dictionaries say nature is that which is not human. Wild is that where people are not. And this apartheid carries on in today's conservation programs, in today's recipes of how to green the earth, always at the cost of the indigenous people. The separation of the earth and us creates the illusion that we can destroy the earth, destroy our sources of oxygen and breath, destroy the forests, allow 300 new infectious diseases to grow out of invaded forests. Of course, the debate on the COVID origins are still unsettled, but we do know new infectious diseases are spreading. All because we've created an economic system based on the illusion of superiority. Our health and the health of the planet is one health because we are part of the earth. We are not her masters, we are not her owners, we are definitely not alien beings. This exile from the earth in our minds is also leading to the billionaire attempted exile from the only living planet there is, this beautiful land, this beautiful earth, to Mars. And we know anyone who's made too much money by deregulation now thinks this world, this earth is not worth being on. And of course, they've always felt that other human beings are less. And that's why their land could be taken. The apartheid is built on racism, it's built on sexism, it is built on classism. And it has just so many layers of violating the rights of the earth, the rights of people, and the integrity of systems that create health. Health means to be whole, to be one. Disease is the absence of wholeness. And from my understanding over all of these years, I have realized that the Earth's metabolism and the social metabolism of society and our bodily metabolism, which is what we see as health, are actually one indivisible continuum. I even see climate change as a disruption of the metabolic systems of the Earth. After all, the Earth created the climate, regulated it, brought temperatures down from 290 degrees without life to 13 degrees average with life. And we're messing that up. And in my country this year, we've had such a horrendous heat wave. In spring, when the flowers should be coming out, 7 degrees higher than last year. We've never seen this kind of extreme. We've never seen the kind of extreme rains we had last year, where we hardly saw the sun. And living on a planet that has regulated her climate, brought down carbon dioxide from 4,000 parts per million to 270 parts per million, from 28% of the atmosphere to 0.03% of the atmosphere. And in the same process that pulled that carbon dioxide down through photosynthesis, with the free light of the sun and the energy of the sun, that miracle of photosynthesis, I call it the highest technology on this planet, and no carbon capture mechanism can get even close to it. Because not only did it take the carbon dioxide, it converted it to life, molecule of life, into carbohydrates that become our food, our fiber, not just for human beings, because we are not the only beings on this planet, but all the beings who create the life conditions for us. And that's not all. My first movement was the Chipko movement, a beautiful movement, where women came out to say, we're going to hug the trees. We won't let you cut these trees because the forests give us soil, water, and pure air. You think these are timber mines. For us, these are life. And they defended the oak forest and the rhododendron forest because the leaves, as they fall, the products of photosynthesis, then become soil. They become humus. They become water because it's in the humus that the water is stored. From there come the springs. So you get food, you get soil, you get water, and even more importantly, oxygen. Show me one solar panel that can give you oxygen, the solar panel of the green leaf. We've been ignoring it. I didn't study biology. I didn't study health. I studied quantum theory. Thank goodness it trained me to understand non-separation. It trained me to understand uncertainty, potential, amazing concepts. And now we are realizing, as Schrödinger, one of my teachers in quantum theory, Schrödinger's equation is what we study. Schrödinger said, in What is Life? It is the miracle of organizing the metabolism of living systems in a negative entropy system. Now, for those of you who don't understand entropy, entropy is waste energy, which you cannot use. When you burn coal, you burn oil, you're wasting that energy. But a little seed, and I saved seeds in Navdanya, and I hope some of you will come to Earth University. You can go to the website of Navdanya, nevdanya.org, and see the courses at the Earth University. But at the Earth University, we learn all this, and I have learned so much of this from nature. We save seeds, and you can plant a little mustard seed, that tiny, and it'll grow into a giant-sized bush. We actually did a calculation once. One seed gave you 1,000 seeds. But in addition, the beautiful mustard leaf, which we eat as a green and is so rich in vitamin A, in iron, in all the deficiencies that they're trying to solve with genetic engineering, through that photosynthesis, it is creating a new abundance and making more and more energy available. We've got to bring entropy back into our thinking. We have to bring living Earth back into our thinking, because that's the way we will connect justice and community health. Every disruption has been created by telling indigenous people this land is not being used fruitfully by you. We will improve it. Look at Locke's treatise on government. He actually says they're leaving the land unimproved. And if we take away most of the land and leave them enough to survive, we will be creating real wealth. And then he went on to say, and wealth is created by mixing labor with nature, but not the labor of women or the horse or the serf, the spiritual labor of the man who owns the horse and the woman and the serf. I just think of these constructions, and they are taught to us as our classical texts. I never studied them. I think that's why I stayed innocent in terms of the structures of capitalist patriarchy and the naturalization of assumptions of separation, of domination, of women being less than men, of indigenous people being primitive, the earth being dead. Bacon talks about subjugating the earth. He was Chancellor of England, but he was also in charge of the Inquisition and the witch hunts. And knowledge of oneness with the earth, knowledge of participation with other living beings was treated as dangerous knowledge because it interfered in the empire of man over lesser creatures, as they wrote. Our health and the health of the planet is non-separable materially, spiritually, culturally. Materially, there are three basic needs: our breath, our water, our food. They make our health. Most children of the world are dying for lack of water. 1 billion people were already hungry. COVID intensified the hunger epidemic. And now, with the Ukraine war and the speculation by agribusiness, 4 companies control the trading, they control the prices. And it isn't that we've suddenly run short of food, it's just that the fear is being used to speculate even more. And as was said in the 2008 crisis, which led to the bread riots, which were called, they were not called bread riots, they were called the Arab Spring. No, people were fighting for bread. And why were people having to fight for bread? Because the speculators who had brought down the US economy with the subprime crisis now are thinking, oh, why don't we speculate on land and why don't we speculate on food? And in the process, they increased the food prices, and the banks, these were saying, don't you love rising prices? And as was written in a very, very good article about the food bubble, that speculative, fictitious wheat sold anywhere on the digital currencies creates an impact on the price of food and wheat and bread everywhere. So the integration of the financial system eventually integrates us in disease. We can be either integrated in one health, if we protect the earth, if we protect the soil, if we protect our waters, if we protect our forests, or we can be integrated in disease. And for me, in this COVID experience, it has been interesting to watch how suddenly health has been substituted by a sickness industry. Everywhere there is new ways of locking people into dependence. In health insurance systems, in big pharma systems. And the big pharma issue for me is particularly interesting because I've ended up spending now 36 years looking at what went wrong with agriculture. Because 1984 was the year we had an uprising of farmers in the state of Punjab, where the Green Revolution was first implemented. So the Green Revolution is not green, it's not revolutionary, it's purely chemical warfare extended to agriculture after the wars were over. The same interests, the same processes, the same materials, nitrogen fertilizer made by the same processes that make explosives, made explosives in Hitler's Germany. That's why so many bombs are fertilizer bombs. Pesticides made first for killing people in concentration camps and then for killing insects. It's an interesting mentality because linked to this apartheid is not just that you are separate from me, you are less than me, but worse, your existence is a threat to me. That was Hitler's thinking. That was the basis of extermination. Now, every insect is part of the web of life. On our farm, we calculated the other day, I stood in a square foot. We had 30 plants, they're called weeds. There's nothing useless in any plant in the world. And of the 13 plants, 2 were uncultivated edibles. The rest were medicinal plants. Most medicinal plants are not cultivated. They grow when you leave the soil free to express our diversity. So we've created a system where every insect is as an enemy that must be exterminated with pesticides. Every plant is an enemy that must be exterminated with glyphosate. I remember very fondly that on my last trip to the campus, one of the things I was involved in was the students for glyphosate-free campuses having a workshop. And I know they've done tremendous works, and I know the University of California campuses are way advanced in creating a poison-free world. I watched the poisons kill people in my country in 1984 in Bhopal. And that's why I started to ask, where did these poisons come from? I wrote the Green Revolution book, The Violence of the Green Revolution. But the tragedies didn't end with Bhopal. Then the same genetic engineering industry created a whole new family of crops that was supposed to get rid of weeds, get rid of pests, never have to spray again, the advertisement said. We have super pests, we have super weeds. In India, we've had 400,000 farmer suicides because of indebtedness linked to dependence on seed and the failure of seed. The GMO BT cotton, which accounts for 85% areas where the suicides are, it has not delivered. It didn't just not give the higher yields that are claimed by genetic engineering. It didn't control the pest. The bollworm is now resistant and new insects have been created, the aphids, the jassids, the armyworm. Every year, there are new infestations. And I've been saving seeds since these suicides started. And we call these seeds of hope. And when the widows would come to me and say, but we've lost our land, we've lost our husband, we have nothing. I said, well, at least you have a little patch around your hut. Let's start gardens of hope. And I feel so grateful that I've had this opportunity to serve our communities and serve the earth. I could see with my eyes that the organic cotton is producing more, the native seeds are producing more. But just because I said it, of course, the entire troll army of the poison cartel was mobilized. Not just once, not twice, again and again and again. And if anyone needs experience on how to deal with armies of trolls, get in touch with me. But we just did a survey with our farmers who grow native cotton and organically. They are producing twice as much than the BT cotton farmers who are supposed to have higher yields and higher incomes. But more interestingly, just a few days ago, I saw government statistics from our agriculture agency, our cotton corporation, and not Monsanto, it's government agencies. And this data is showing, and I'll just run through with you, in the state of Madhya Pradesh, the difference between the organic cotton and BT cotton is 382%. And we keep being told GMOs increase yield. Maharashtra, which is where the suicides are very high, and this is where we were, 374%. In Orissa, 161%. In Gujarat, 103%. Rajasthan, 150%. But it isn't just that this fails. I remember about 2017, I had to rush down because the pests were so high that farmers had to use more pesticides. And every year, 380 million people are poisoned with pesticides, mostly agricultural workers. And they, again, the justice to the earth, the justice to insects, justice to plants, the justice to agricultural workers, and the health of all of them is all interconnected. Every year, 11,000 people die. And the highest is in India. 60% pesticide deaths are in India, 6,600 every year, many of them in this BT cotton belt. And the children are the worst impacted. 1.7 million children are dying because of toxic-induced cancers. We know only 5% cancers are genetic. The rest are coming from the lethal toxins we are putting out into the environment. And leukemia and brain cancer have increased 40% among children, just in the last 40 years, which is the period of intensification. The use of chemicals shot up after the GMOs were introduced. Now, the GMO story is interesting because of many reasons. It is the reason I saved seeds. I was at a meeting in 1987 where the industry was present. It was a meeting on the new biotechnologies. 87, there were no commercial GMOs. The first GMO crop was commercialized in 92 in the United States. And the industry laid out very clearly, they said, we want to do genetic engineering in order to take patents on seed. They went further. They said, in order to have patents, which we can only claim through genetic engineering, we've got to enforce patent laws around the world that make it illegal for farmers to save seeds. And I said, but it's our duty to save seeds. Protecting biodiversity is our ethical, ecological duty. And they knew if they don't ban indigenous seed, they will never be able to create a GMO market. It's only by criminalizing the action that brings a seed freedom can they even have a market. So I said, I'm going to save seeds. And if they continue to push laws, we will not cooperate with those laws. We've worked with more than 1 million farmers, created 150 community seed banks across India. And those seeds have helped farmers recover from the debt trap that's leading to suicide. In the cyclone-affected areas, we just saved seeds lovingly. In those seeds were salt-tolerant seeds, flood-tolerant seeds. Our communities have saved 4,000 rice varieties. The Indian peasants, the tribals, have evolved 200 house rice varieties. And in our seed bank in the Bay of Bengal, we have more than 1,200 varieties with large numbers that are salt and flood tolerant. And when the cyclone happened in 1999, we distributed them. The tsunami took place, we took truckloads down to Tamil Nadu. Amphan, every year there are 2 or 3 cyclones now. But because we save the seeds in the commons through the community seed banks, farmers can share it. Interestingly, I've had many debates with the Gates Foundation. They turn up at conferences where I'm addressing, and then they'll talk about what they're doing. And they'll talk about how they've invented the SUM gene that can tolerate floods. And I said, where did you get the parent from? And they never give me a reply. Because these seeds are taken from Indian innovation, the collective innovation of farmers. So I was outraged with the idea that a bunch of criminals whose expertise is in killing now want to parade as creators of life. And when people get too confused with what's a genetically engineered organism, I just say GMO means God move over. We are the creators. We will collect rents, because an intellectual property right, a patent rights, is mainly a monopoly that allows you to collect rents from what would have been the commons and would have been accessible to everyone. Fortunately, in India, we didn't just save the seeds and create so many seed banks. I worked with our government. I worked with our parliament. We created a law, Article 3J in our patent law, that says plants, animals, and seeds are not human inventions. And since a patent is for a human invention, these cannot be patentable. Of course, Monsanto collected royalties illegally. And when the seed companies came to me and showed me the papers, I said, they're lying to you. We don't have patents of seed in India. This patent they're showing you is in a US patent. So cases started till just literally just before COVID. They still tried to challenge our Article 3J and said the seed is an empty container and it's the chemicals they put into it that make it the miracle. Just like they said earlier, the soil is an empty container. It's the chemicals we put into it that give it fertility. When on the contrary, the chemical fertilizers made by the same processes that make explosives and ammunition are responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. Nitrous oxide is 300 times more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide. And there's total silence in the climate community about nitrous oxide. Nitrogen fertilizers are creating dead zones wherever the fertilizer runoff goes. Worse, they're killing the soil because no mycorrhizal fungi can coexist with the chemical fertilizers, no earthworms. When I used to do early trainings myself, I used to take earthworms and I'd sprinkle a little urea on it. And I tell the farmers this, so, oh my gosh, we didn't know this is what killing we're doing. We promise we will never, ever commit violence to the earth. We will become organic. At least for me in India, it's been possible for farmers to shift to a non-violent mode of farming through the ethics of non-violence to the earth. This year, or 2 years now, first the COVID came, then the vaccines came. And interestingly, while on the one hand, it was about saving people, on the other hand, there were vaccine patents that were creating a vaccine apartheid. And the very people who were preventing the cure from reaching people were claiming they were there to cure the people. And I think intellectual property rights and enclosures of the intellectual commons is one of the biggest violations of both public health in terms of the right to food and the right to healthcare, as well as the right to justice. Because in my worldview, everything that's necessary for living is a commons. The soil and land is a commons. In no indigenous culture was land property. It's colonialism that made it property. The locks of the world. Enclosures of the commons is where it begins. Seed. I feel grateful, 35 years, I've been able to not just expand the commons of the seed, but I think we are now finding, because we've had the time, our research is now showing that indigenous seeds are more nutritious, they're more climate resilient, they're more tasty. I've helped the farmers who grow seeds to also create their economic networks. And people come for the old seeds because they're just worthy of food. They're worthy of being eaten. Stuff that is parading as food is not food. Food is nourishment. Food is the currency that connects us, the soil, the plants, in one interconnected whole. And that's why it's not an accident that, the Hippocrates Oath says, let food be thy medicine, is what Hippocrates taught us. And in Ayurveda, the most ancient healing system of the world, most science of life, it means Sarv Annam Sharva Oshdi, food is your first medicine. You eat right, you will be healthy. And the food industry has constantly made every attempt to poison food, to have additives parade as food. And I've done about 3 books in recent years on Monsanto was my favorite company, but Monsanto disappeared because it was bought out by Bayer. But I noticed 2015 at the at the Paris summit, the person running the UN suddenly was Mr. Gates. So I wrote a book called Oneness versus 1%. And then we suddenly realized his tentacles were everywhere and running the WHO, running the FAO, basically becoming the biggest farmland owner of America. One agriculture. I remember when I was coming to Santa Cruz, I read in a newspaper, one agriculture for the world, Ag One, Gates Ag One said. We started to look more closely. Every field, geoengineering, fake food. So we have a new book out called Philanthrocapitalism that has come out from Synergetic Press earlier this year. And another book, which is my 36 years of an agriculture for health on agroecology and regenerative farming, also from Synergetic Press, that literally just got released. Whether it be the food we eat, the poisons that enter our body, this connection between the harm to the planet and harm to our health is material, it's toxic, but we have opportunities to do it differently. That's the work I've been doing ever since 1984. And the measurement that's used in agriculture is usually yields per acre. But yield merely means the commodity that left the land. It doesn't measure the state of the soil. It doesn't measure the state of the farmer. It doesn't measure the quality and health of the food. So this is a very deceptive measure. It's as deceptive as the GDP, the gross domestic product, or GNP, gross national product, which merely measured how much did you turn of society and nature into cash, into commodities. So you chop a forest down, you have increase in GDP. You plant a garden, it doesn't show. A mother takes care of her child, doesn't show in the GDP. Indigenous knowledge, indigenous production doesn't show. You put toxics into the river, and there's cancer. And with every cancer victim, Big Pharma contributes to the GDP. So what we've created is an economic system that is not an economy, because economy means the art of living. Economy does not mean making money. Aristotle had a very clear word for that. He defined art of living as economy and the art of making money as chromatistics. What is passing as the economy today is the art of money making. But money making is bigger when more people are sick, when everyone is healthy, when the community is healthy, when we have justice, when healthcare is a commons and the right to delivery is accessible to all, as it was in all public health systems. I have been ill in Europe with serious illnesses, never had to spend a rupee, a dollar, a euro. I've been ill once in California. I had an infection. And while I was waiting for them to check out my insurance from India, the infection was traveling up, and they were telling me how Norman Bethune died of this particular infection. I could have died in California. The denial to the right to health and the creation of the conditions of ill health through spreading disease, in my view, are crimes against humanity. They are, of course, violations of human rights, but all human rights flow from a healthy environment. So the rights of the earth and the rights of human beings are not separate, they're not different. So instead of measuring yield per acre, I just said we're going to measure biodiversity, because biodiversity is what makes the web of life. And then I said, let's now take the nutrition in the biodiversity. And we did these calculations on real farmers' fields. We call the indicator nutrition per acre rather than yield per acre. And the figures just changed, where the green revolution models were showing more commodity flow, the biodiversity model was showing higher nutrition. We can feed, we have a report called Health Per Acre. It's available on the Navdanya website. Do look at it. We can feed 2 times India's population by conserving biodiversity, which also increases climate resilience, which regenerates the soil. We're doing a very detailed study. Every 10 years, we do a deep study on the relationship between the health of the soil, the health of plants, and our health. We're doing a new one this year, because the more the soil organisms, the more the fungi, the more the photosynthesis in the plant, the more the phytochemicals, and that's where health comes from. Chemically fertilized soils are producing nutritionally empty commodities, and there's so much study in this. And the organic is shooting up the yields of nutrition, which is what really matters when we eat food. I have data from our farmers in Vidarbha, and across the board, the chemical system has less nutrition and the organic foods have more nutrition. So if what we are facing is a hunger and disease and nutrition epidemic, what we need to be doing is taking care of the soil and the soil organisms, so the soil organisms can take care of the plant and the plants can take care of our health. We then said, everyone's talking about how the farmers need to use GMOs, farmers need to use chemicals to have higher incomes. So we just did another survey with our farmers. And we call this study the wealth per acre. By taking the true cost account, the two figures that came out of this study was first that the externalities of chemical farming is $1.3 trillion when you just take the social harm, the farmer's death, the suicide, and the environmental harm, the death of the birds, the death of the animals, erosion of soil. But we add to that health costs. For India alone, the externalities of chemical agriculture shoot up to be about $3.5 trillion, which is the size of our GDP. So the shadow of the economy that's causing harm to the earth and harm to people is bigger, except, as I said, the mismeasure of commodification allows this to be shown as growth and profits. Let me just share with you figures where we collected from the WHO data the costs of the new chronic disease, because not only are we the system creating new infectious diseases, but it's creating non-communicable diseases. And the global cancer costs 2.5 trillion. And this doesn't include all of the external risks, families selling lands, families selling homes, families giving up jobs, just the treatment. 2.5 trillion cancer, diabetes 2.5 trillion, infertility 3.6 billion, endocrine disruption 549 billion, AMR infections again linked to the industrial model of farming 1 trillion, obesity 1.2 trillion, birth defects 22.9 billion, neurodegenerative diseases 2.4 trillion, autism 171 billion. This is not an economy. This is a diseconomy. And therefore, if we have to bring justice to the center, we've got to begin by reshaping our economies around the larger public good. And this much I have learned in my many, many, many years of research and activism, that every harm to the earth is harm to people, and particularly extra harm to the most vulnerable. The ecological and social impact is not symmetric. Those who have already been pushed to the margins are pushed further to the margins. Just take COVID. Who were the people who died? The same people who are pushed by poverty to eat junk food, yet have diabetes, have cancer, live in cancer alleys. The risks of mortality jumped 7.6% with cancer, 9.2% with diabetes. And for you as a community working on health, do look at this new language that is being naturalized. When I had to rush back from my international travel when COVID struck, because the flights were getting cancelled. And literally soon after I came, the lockdown was implemented. But I read in the New York Times an article saying, who lives and who dies is a decision that now has to be made. Increasingly, research is showing that the old people weren't just allowed to die, they were killed by denying them healthcare. And I read a paper the other day, the economic case for killing Granny. The former, Christine Lagarde, she used to be IMF chief, and now she's the Central Bank of Europe chief. And she says, care for old people is coming in the way of the global economy. And I think any economic system that starts to see human beings as disposable is not worthy of the word economic. People are not disposable. The economic model can be changed. Our paradigms can be changed. And you all are there to shape a new paradigm for justice, a new paradigm for health, a health of the planet, the health of people, and create a new oneness in a thriving economy where no one lacks anything, as Gandhi taught us again and again and again. The earth has enough for everyone's needs, but not for a few people's greed. Greed is the disease that is destroying the planet. Greed is the disease that is denying people right to health. Greed is the disease that is creating injustice between the 1% and the rest. Now is the time for us to create true health, which is justice, true health, which is sustainability. Greetings, and I'm so sorry I couldn't join you, but we are dependent on visas to travel, and I didn't have a visa renewal because of the COVID lockdown and everything being shut down, but I'm with you in spirit. Lots of love to all of you. Thank you.